Yes. Good. I see some. Go ahead. So just based on the names that I see for Meredith and Alex, I'll just let you know we do have advisors joining us from Saudi, UAE, Palestinian territories, Egypt, Tunisia, Israel, and then our Syria advisor is based in the US, so he's in Washington, DC. Libya, we have our Libya advisor. And then Kirsten Allen, I think that's one of our counselors. We've got a few other folks joining in here as well. So just to give you a sense of how spread out in the region, we have people joining. So I'll give it another minute. Are there still people in the waiting room, Asil?
She's muted. Oh, there.
I did let them all. So I'm keeping an eye on them. Yep.
Okay. Great. So I will get us started right now. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, morning, or afternoon. We are happy to have you here and provide this training opportunity. We want to thank and welcome our presenters and speakers for today, Meredith and Alex, who will give you a brief introduction about themselves. But as I was just sharing a little bit at the start, we do have quite a diverse range of advisors and counselors with us this afternoon, evening, morning, joining us. So what we want to do today is really give you an opportunity to learn more about the Common App. This is really your chance to ask questions. We know that there have been many student inquiries coming in with some challenges they might have, particular stumbling blocks that they hit, and with some of our newer advisors who are actually on the call today as well. This will really be a great chance for you to better understand the Common App, how it's used, and also hear from a university perspective that is familiar with international student applicants so that you can get a little bit more insight. So with that, and actually for those that don't know me, because I know it's not just advisors, our EducationUSA advisors on the call, let me take a step back. My name is Melissa Deschamps. I'm the EducationUSA Regional Educational Advising Coordinator for the Middle East and North Africa. And so I am, again, happy to have you all here. And I want to thank Paula and Asil with our EducationUSA Qatar team for coordinating today's session. We are recording this. So for some colleagues, counselors, other advisors who maybe were not able to join today, we will be able to share the recording with them and you will have an opportunity to reference back as needed. So with that, and without further delay, I will turn it over to Meredith and Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. And thank you, Asil, and thank you, Paula. Alex and I are excited and happy to be with you all today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Okay. So as Melissa said, we're going to kind of do a deeper dive into Common App, but also make sure that we have time to answer any questions that you have that either you've had or students have had. So really just here to be a resource for you. Feel free, again, you can put your questions in the chat as we're going along, or again, at the end, we have built in some time for questions. Just to do a quick introduction to us. So I work at Common App. We are based in the DC area. I heard that at least one of you is also based in the DC area. I work on our access and equity team, doing outreach and education for the organization. Prior to joining Common App, and I just hit my 5-year anniversary with Common App, so it was yesterday, but I was a high school counselor myself. So I worked in a school in Washington, DC with DC Public Schools and also outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Alex, do you want to say hello and do your introductions?
Sure. Hey, good night, everyone in Doha, and good morning to those on the East Coast. My My name's Alex. I recognize a few familiar names here on the screen. I'm the Director of Admission at Northwestern's Global Campus here in Doha, Qatar. I've been in higher ed about 15 years. 7 of those have been in the Gulf, first in Saudi Arabia at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, KAUST, and then later here at Northwestern. And yeah, I've worked at a couple of Common App schools, so here to answer questions, kind of share a little bit of how it looks from our side, and happy to answer any questions, no matter how big or small they are. Thanks so much.
Great. All right, so just to kind of give you a perspective of how today is going to run, we'll do a quick introduction to who Common App is. Alex will give you an update on Northwestern Qatar. We'll talk about, give you the insight of what the student journey is like using Common App, as well as the counselor and advisor experience. Make sure you know where to access tools, and then again, answer your questions. We will share, in addition to the recording today, a copy of these slides, so you'll be able to go back and access any of these resources. This slide shows you the growth of Common App as a membership organization. Not many people think of Common App as a nonprofit membership organization, but we started in 1975 as an experiment where 15 colleges got together and believed that they could simplify the process for students who may be applying to peer institutions. That experiment grew from 15 members to now over 900 member institutions. Behind that, we also are driven by a mission of access, equity, and integrity in the college admission process. And there's a lot of work that we do at the organization and with our members really in that pursuit. And part of that is expanding access for international students. We always send a map out every year, except for this year because of the global pandemic. And so in some high schools and offices, you would see a copy of this map, which shows the current Common App member schools. Because of the pandemic, we did not mail them this year, but if you have an office or have a future office and would like to have a map, you can request one. It's kind of a map on demand this year. So if you go to commonapp.org/map, you can get one for yourself so that you can show students, especially again, when you're outside of the United States, just being able to have a sense of where a school is located because the United States is so large, but also recognizing that Common App supports member institutions, not just in the US, but also internationally. So we have 62 international member institutions that are in 18 countries outside of the US. In terms of who is using the Common App platform, so every year we have at least 1 million students who submit one application or more through Common App. Those students predominantly come from the US, around 91%, but then 9% are coming from over 200 countries outside of the US. And you might want to, think about, well, where are those students coming from? Around a quarter are coming from China, followed by India and Canada in the top 3. But then again, coming from all over. I did highlight some of the MENA region schools so you can see where you fall, at least among the top 50. Now I will hand it over to you, Alex. Whenever you need me to change slides, just let me know.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Meredith. So here's our lovely campus. For those of you that are in Doha, Education City and the Qatar Foundation, there's 6 American universities, and it's very similar to a traditional American university campus, but instead of having like the College of Engineering or the School of Journalism, we have Northwestern, Georgetown, Carnegie Mellon, Texas A&M, Virginia Commonwealth, and I always forget one. I think it's Cornell. And so we're all together. We share facilities. We have shared dormitories and student facilities, and it's a really cool dynamic. Meredith, do you mind heading to the next one? And so here's kind of the global reach of Northwestern. It is in the middle of the United States, so right outside of Chicago, Illinois. And we only have one international campus, and that's in Doha. It's really small. I like to tell people it's kind of like the International Honors College of Northwestern. We have about 500 students. We only have a couple of majors, journalism and communications, but it's a really dynamic and diverse community. In that 500 students, there's only about there's about 60 nationalities represented. So it's a pretty immersive experience. Next one, Meredith. And so here's kind of us in a snapshot, our majors. So we have our 2 majors. We sprinkle it in with liberal arts. And about half of the classes are liberal arts courses. And then there are a number of majors and minors and certificates that students can get. We partner with Georgetown for a number of programs, and students can actually cross-register and take classes at the other universities as well. In regards to the Common App, Northwestern is a Common App school, and our campus actually has our own account as well. So there's actually 2 ways students can apply. They can apply directly to us, and then we receive their application. It doesn't go to the main campus. Or they can apply directly to the main campus, and then if they select journalism or communications, they would receive a pop-up question saying, hey, would you like to be considered for the overseas campus? And then the main campus gets that application and it's forwarded to us. So there's kind of 2 ways there. And Common App has a really cool feature, if you haven't seen it already, for a number of schools that either have kind of branch campuses or campuses in other places, like a Johnson and Wales, for instance. The other campuses are listed on the bottom of their page. So students can very quickly and conveniently access the different locations when they apply. And that's it for me, Meredith.
You know, Alex, yesterday was the first time that I looked at how Northwestern had set up the dynamics to see how students could get to, you know, whether they were interested in the international campus. And so, yes, and as you've mentioned, many campuses or universities in the US do that to also highlight their campuses abroad. All right, well, I know we're going to ask you more questions. Ooh, so you're not off the hook just yet. But here's just a quick, again, overview. I know that many of you are coming from different levels of experience. Some of you have been using Common App for 5-10 years. Some of you, maybe it's their first or second year. So this will be an overview, but also hopefully not too elementary, that everyone will get something from this. If nothing else, just knowing that Common App has a website with resources, you don't have to go directly to just doing the application or doing the recommender process. We did a refresh of our website 2 years ago in 2019, where we really updated content, really in service again of our mission and strategic direction to make it more inclusive of the diversity of the students that we serve, as well as the diversity of members we serve. One of the things that we redid when we updated our website was to update our Explore Colleges page. So we added a lot of filters that did not exist in the past. So students can, again, find what schools are on Common App, knowing that not all colleges use the Common App or are not part of the membership. You can find schools based on the size of their student population. You can see that there are filters for the schools that offer aid, financial aid for international students. You can see map views of schools. You can also print lists of schools. That was something that couldn't be done in the past. So even if you just needed a list of which schools are members of Common App, you could go to this Explore Colleges page and print the full list of 922 members. There's also a filter for test optional. We know the majority of Common App members this year, because of COVID-19, did go test optional or offer a test optional policy. But we also know that that gets a little challenging for international applicants. And so just knowing that that filter's there, but also if you're not familiar with the resource fairtest.org, they also track schools' test optional policies and have specific information as it relates to international applicants. We also have a global search function on commonapp.org. So if you ever just are looking for certain text string, you can always use the magnifying glass to find that. Another piece of the Common App website are that all of our members have a profile page. So for students who just want to get an understanding of a school, they can go to these profile pages. There are tags. There are also virtual tours. So the students can actually see what it would be like to be on those campuses, image galleries. The schools can also highlight their academic programs, to talk about the types of majors that they offer and any clubs or activities that they want to highlight. Again, it's not necessarily a comprehensive list, but it is what the individual member colleges want to make sure that students know about their campuses. Again, if you're looking for resources, we have a plan page on our website that has guides to the application and recommender process. Again, if you're not in there as frequently as some others, you may just need those kind of guides just to help you and your students through the process. So just knowing that that exists out there. Another piece of Common App that a lot of people don't know about is that we do have this account rollover feature. So students don't have to only create their account in the year that they're applying. If you are working with students who are in grade 10 or grade 11, or depending on the grading, how it works in your country, they can create their account earlier than the year that they're applying. So we do start a new application cycle on August 1st each year, but students don't have to wait. They can create their username and password. They can start filling out parts of the application, and I'll show you the Common App tab sections. What doesn't roll over, though, are any college-specific questions. And that's because the colleges have the ability over the summer, prior to August 1, to update any questions that they may want to ask. And so we do not carry that information over, but for students, their address and their general demographic information, that does carry over if they create their account in a prior year. So one thing, again, if you're not familiar, you can create your own practice account as a student. When you go to the website and you create an account or click create an account, it asks you, are you a first-year student? Are you a transfer student? Are you an education professional? Or are you a parent or other adult? And if you select education professional, it will tell you, great, like you're creating a practice account. You can get in there and explore the application and do everything like a student. You just can't submit your application, and you're not seen as a prospect student for the admissions offices. But this is just a great way for you to familiarize yourself with the application. So once I'm in there, and again, hopefully one of your takeaways is to have a practice account. Hopefully many of you do. I always start on the college search tab. This is where, again, students are adding their colleges to their list. They can also access the application requirements grid. So it's basically the large spreadsheet of all of our members, every deadline that they have, all of the fees that are that any school charges. We get to ask that a lot, is Common App free? How does it work in terms of payment? And so Common App is free to use. We have over 400 members that do not charge an application fee, but every individual institution or college chooses if they're going to charge a fee. And so one school might charge $30 US, another school may charge $50 US, another one may charge $100 US. And so students will see that as they're applying to each individual school. Students can also use filters. I don't have a piece there, but there's a part where it says more filters. So students can even find the schools that don't charge an application fee. Specifically, there is even a filter for international students. When it comes to the Common App tab, this is where students spend their time putting in their general information that's not specific to any specific college. So there's, again, 7 sections: a profile section, a family section, education section, testing, activities, writing, and then courses and grades. Students can bounce around between sections, so they don't have to complete one in order to move to the next, but they do get green check marks anytime they complete a section or a subsection. There are videos throughout to help guide students. There are links to frequently asked questions, which then also go to our our support team. So we do have 24/7 support, recognizing that we are working with students all over the globe who are on all different time zones, but we do have that availability to reach out to someone to get help at any time of day or night. Just thinking about some other questions that we get frequently are, do I have to fill in every single box that Common App has? And the answer is no. We have required questions that are marked with a red asterisk. And then we have other questions that we try to gather as much information as we can to give to our member institutions, but not all questions relate to every student in every country or every school. So again, a frequent question we hear are like, what if, there are these questions about class rank and GPA scales and GPA weighting. A lot of international students, this is not related to their schooling, and so they don't know how to answer this. So we do have an FAQ that says, if your school doesn't rank, you can say none. If you don't have a numerical GPA, you can leave that blank. It's not required. Alex, I'm going to pause here just because I'm not sure if you have heard this question a lot, if you have additional insights on this direction to help counselors and advisors.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we get this pretty regularly, and sometimes students will say, "Hey, can I change it after I've submitted it?" And our common response is to kind of say, "Hey, don't worry about it, because we're going to end up getting your actual transcript, and then we'll be able to enter that into our system when we do our file reading. We'll be able to evaluate that." But it's tricky. If you take like Doha, for instance, we have so many different school systems here, everything from, American school system, Filipino school system, to the Indian system in the UK. And so it's really hard to kind of put everybody into like a 4.0 GPA, and that we end up recalculating a lot when we read it later on.
Alex, another question that I get a lot are, how do the admissions offices know about my school system or how our school grading works?
That's a great question, and I can only speak for Northwestern right now, and maybe my previous other Common App school that I was at, University of Miami. But what I would say is we will find that out when we get the recommendations or the supporting documents from counselors, and most schools will either note that on the recommendation forms, or they'll provide a school profile. And that's where admissions officers can go in there and take a closer look at the specific school.
Great. And that's one I would, happily at the end, if people have questions about school profiles. I know that not all schools have created a school profile, but as you've mentioned, Alex, it's something that is really helpful, especially when an admissions counselor may not be as familiar with a school, just to get some basic information. So again, happy to discuss that after.
And so 2 questions have popped up for now, so I figure we'll throw them in there, sprinkle it in. Can a student start a practice account and later change it to a student account? That's one question.
Great question. So the practice accounts are meant for adults. The student, when they go there, it's going to ask them, like, are you a student? And once they create student, it's just a real live account. So students are never practice accounts. Again, they don't have to apply in the year that they create an account, but once they select student, they just have a live student account. If for some reason, because this does also happen, if a student accidentally creates a practice account, that's okay. They can just contact our support team, and the support team can change them over from practice to a live student account.
Okay. And the second question we have now is, if students don't have counselors, what can they do? I know that's a common question in our region.
Yes, and I think that comes up later in this presentation as one of the frequently asked questions, but we'll address it now. So what we say at Common App is, we are familiar that the role of a school counselor does not exist across the globe, and it is something that is more prevalent in the United States. The important piece is who is an education professional at the high school that has access to the student's academic records. And so sometimes it's the principal, sometimes the assistant principal, it can be the head of schools. Alex, do you want to chime in there as well?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. It gets tricky too with students that might just be sitting for exams and essentially be fulfilling their, year 13 or senior year at a testing center or something to that effect. We every once in a while get students that say, I simply can't provide a recommendation. And we push back a little bit on that and say, look, you have to have had a teacher. You have to have had somebody who can talk about your educational experience. As far as the transcript goes in the educational system, most international admission officers out there can tell the system that the student was in right away from reading the transcript. It's really, easy to pick up. So I don't think that any university out there would look negatively upon the student's application simply because of that.
Great, thank you.
We also, hear that sometimes teachers also serve in the role of counselor. And so I think that's also a part where there's a trick or there can be a challenge where the teacher is trying to fill out the counselor paperwork and recommendation, but then they have the same letter for the teacher letter of recommendation. And so in those instances, what I've seen, and again, Alex, feel free to chime in. We do have a part in the Common App where the counselor can say, I'm not, providing a letter of recommendation, and they could put their, my letter of recommendation is submitted as the teacher letter of recommendation. Like, it doesn't have to be the same letter submitted 2 times. All right. Yeah, Melissa, feel free. It's great if you want to, because we're kind of a small group. Yeah, feel free to add questions whenever you think it's relevant.
Yeah, I'll let you go on a little bit and then we'll add a couple more of the other questions throughout.
Okay, sounds good. Also just wanted to note that Common App does have a fee waiver. So for students who demonstrate economic need, they can request an application fee waiver in the system. There are criteria that a student does have to check off, and you will notice that they are very US centric. So one thing that we recommend for international students, because there are international students with need, is that they reach out to individual institutions that they might want to apply to find out if that institution accepts fee waivers from international students. That's just one of those where the student could request the fee waiver, submit their application, but it might come back where they're asked to still pay the fee. And Alex, I'll ask you again there, because we hear this question a lot from international students. Do they qualify for the Common App fee waiver?
Yeah, I mean, we would go and follow these guidelines. We get requests for fee waivers quite regularly, and we ask the student for an explanation. Let us know why you're deserving of this, and just try to kind of chip away and make sure it's not because they're applying to 5 million schools and just want another fee waiver again. But we're pretty liberal with this, and then just following up on a question on the side here about can Education USA advisors act as student counselors in the cases that they don't have one at their school? I would say 100%. And in fact, in our case, if we see Education USA and that there's a recommendation there or there's something mentioned, that's a big relief for us in that the students, for real, they're really serious, they put a lot of preparation into it, and so we would be excited to see that.
Okay.
I just want to add comment that was added from our advisor in Lebanon, who said that fee waivers were really a lifesaver this year, because with the economic crises that were going on in Lebanon, there was a lot of challenges for students to be able to pay for certain things with the use of credit cards and sending monies abroad. So that was really helpful. And I'll add one more question that was thrown here since we're on the recommenders. It says, in the recommenders and FERPA fields in the Common App, do I have to invite a counselor and or teacher, since some of the colleges do require it? There's an exclamation point in front of it, as well as no tick in the field as an incompleted without inviting them. So do they have to make an invitation for that field?
Yeah, so students do have to invite a counselor. The teacher invitation is really dependent on the schools that the student is applying to, because not all schools require teacher letters of recommendation. So if it just happened that a student was applying to 5 schools and none of them required any teacher letters of recommendation, they would not have to do an invitation, but it is based on the schools that they are applying to. And that's, again, in that requirements grid on the college search tab, where students can see which schools require letters and how many they require. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm hopping around, but I've hopped over to the education section, and I just wanted to make sure that Education USA advisors know that there is a community-based organizations part of the application, and students can indicate if they have worked with any organizations to help them through the process. So one of the examples is Education USA. It is in the dropdown. Students, this is just, again, helpful for the colleges and universities to know that a student is serious, like Alex mentioned, and has sought help and support through this process. My guess is that a lot of students with Education USA are working maybe and have done programming through Education USA, but don't necessarily know that they can report that here. So I wanted to make sure you all know, so you can advise your students that they can indicate this here. And they can report up to 3 organizations. So it's quite possible that they are working with another organization. They can also put that here as well. And if they do put Education USA as the first community-based organization, it will then also ask them to include advisor contact information. Okay, also just wanted to make sure that you've seen or are aware that we did add a COVID-19 question into the application this year, and it's actually called a community disruption question. So it is inclusive of COVID-19. It also mentions natural disasters. This can also be inclusive of unrest in a country, anything that has a larger impact on a student to their school community or region or country. It is an optional question, so students do not have to answer this, but it is there so that the space is provided if students need it, if they need to talk about access to technology, or whether they've had quiet study spaces, if they've had a change in family obligations, if they've had a loss of income to their family. All of this can be used in a space where they don't have to write their personal essay about COVID-19. They certainly can, but it's just a place so that if they want to talk about impact here, they can also still have their essay. And there's an additional information question as well, where they have that space. We have more information about this on our blog, so I included that link. Moving over to the My Colleges tab, and I know that that's kind of where the question had come in. This is where students are applying to the individual institutions. So it's accordion style. When it comes time to apply to a particular school, this is where students are going to answer college-specific questions, where they are doing the FERPA release, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, basically giving permission to the schools and recommenders to send academic records directly to the colleges. This is where students are submitting their application, again, individually to each school. You'll also notice that Some schools have a additional writing supplement, which is a separate submission. So making sure that students understand that, especially if they're like other students and procrastinate and wait till the last minute, that they know that there are 2 submissions that they have to get by the deadline for a particular school. And again, this is where students are inviting their counselor and their teacher recommenders. So in terms of the recommenders that the student can invite, there are 4 different kinds in Common App. The first one is the counselor. Again, this is the person who is talking about the school community, has access to the student's academic records, and also can write a counselor letter of recommendation. Not all schools at Common App require it, so only 40% of our members actually require a counselor letter. The counselor also has access to track the student's progress with the application. So there's something else to consider. There's a teacher role where, again, someone who has been in a learning environment, teaching environment with the student and can talk about their academics. There are no member colleges of Common App that require more than 2 teacher letters. So that's also something that you can just help with advising your students in terms of numbers. I would say more often it's 1 teacher is more average than 2. You'll also see that only 1/3 of schools actually require a teacher letter. So just trying to dispel some myths about, all students need letters of recommendation for their colleges. Third type of recommender is an other recommender. It is optional. Not all schools will even accept an other recommender letter of recommendation, but if they do, then students can invite someone this way. And then the 4th type is the advisor role. And this is where a student can invite someone like an Education USA advisor to track their progress. So the advisor role is not, that role is not submitting any forms. It's just the ability for the student to share their academic progress or application progress with you or anyone else. A student can invite up to 3 individuals. So sometimes they invite a peer or they invite a teacher that they're working with or a parent or guardian. But this allows that advisor to have access to the student's PDF copy of their application. So again, last year we had 47,000 advisors using the advisor role to do the tracking. Again, that invitation exists in the recommenders and FERPA section. And if you do happen to support a larger caseload of students, the data is exportable to Excel. All right, I'm looking at my time, so I do want to make sure that we have time for questions. Again, you will get an invitation if you were invited as a recommender. For those of you who have been doing this for a few years, you probably logged in this year and the recommender system looked completely different. We went through a refresh of the system. So last year we refreshed the application system. This year, the recommenders got a refresh, and the drivers behind it to modernize the system, to make it more accessible, especially for individuals with disabilities, to make it more mobile responsive and responsive to the type of device someone is using, whether they're working on their phone or tablet, desktop, laptop, and then to incorporate Common App's new branding. So just so you, again, know, there is a walkthrough that exists within the system that kind of talks about the different parts. There are new filters that can be used if you want to find students that are applying to certain schools or deadlines. Lots of great information. There are to-do lists for counselors, teachers, advisors. There's help when you have questions. Again, you can still, just like the application requirements grid lives in the application, it also lives in the recommender system, and you can do the Excel downloads. Seeing what else? Just some user experience updates from feedback that we'd been hearing over the years of how we can make improvements. So getting birthdays in there, Common App ID, notifications, application preview so that you can actually see the student's application if they share it with you. I know I'm going fast, but I just want to get to the questions because that's really where where we can be most helpful. We also know that you are supporting students at schools that may be using college platforms like Unifrog or Zello or Cialfo or Maya Learning, Bridge U. And so we are integrated with those systems. So sometimes the teachers and counselors are submitting their school forms through the partners as opposed to through Common App. But we do have, again, that integration. Also, the counselors are asked to complete a COVID-19 question as well. And so here's where the counselor or school official can talk about the impact to the school if they have gone to a virtual setting, if there have been classes that have been canceled, if there was the inability to do any standardized testing like SAT or ACT. So this all is posed to the counselor. I will, ask you, Alex, how you've seen this, like if students have been using this as they've been submitting. How can we best advise individuals to use this space, and also when they don't need to use this space, because we get that question as well.
Yeah, so we've been seeing a lot of kind of documentation on the COVID situation, and both from counselors and students. And I think, it's been really effective for us for maybe boarding schools or schools where students are having to travel, their learning's disrupted and they're sent home. And so having the counselor kind of explain that type of scenario is really important for us to kind of understand things, because then it helps shed insight into the personal statement from the student and kind of what's going on there. But, I'll be frank with everybody. Imagine every admission office in the world right now, for almost every student is getting 2 COVID statements, one from the counselor and from the student. And so it is getting repetitive. And so, I think one of the other issues that we see, and we get a lot of questions from students, particularly in the GCC, is, what essays do I have to submit? And so this understanding the necessary Common App essay prompt that everyone has to submit, and then these optional essays that each school requires. And some universities out there that went test optional a while ago, they may require 3, 4, 5 additional short answer questions. And so it's important for students to prepare early to answer all of these things.
That's such helpful feedback too, Alex, because when we watch students, not watch students, but we can see student behavior in the application as they're going through the process. And even though we've allowed for access where students can jump around, they still many times will go through it as a linear process. And so if they're doing the Common App tab first, and then it's not until later that they go to the My Colleges tab, it's like they're not even looking at what the supplemental questions are until very late in the process. And so I think that, just advice to students to go directly to the schools, even at the beginning, to understand what are the additional requirements that I need to know for this school. How many extra supplemental questions are they? Are they short answer? Are they essay? Are they optional? Are they required? Getting them to look at that at the beginning of the process instead of waiting until late in the process.
Yeah, and just participating in it. I mean, we're really big on demonstrated interest in making sure that students are excited about us, if we're excited about them, and students that don't do our optional essay about why they want to come to Northwestern, it's a big red flag right away. And so during the reading season, that's something that we look for, and it can impact a decision.
That's great. This is again just some of the questions that we get, and so I'll pose them to you, Alex, just to get your take on this. So counselors will ask us, does it hurt if I don't write a letter of recommendation, if it's optional?
I would say absolutely it does not hurt. I would prefer that than writing a recommendation that kind of could be perceived as flippant or not supportive of the student, which, we do see those from time to time. And counselor recs and the counselor form are really, really big piece of the story. And so we really look closely on it.
And that gets to that second question of, and I know you're speaking for your current position, as well as thinking about other schools that you've worked at. How important are those letters of recommendation in terms of the overall review?
I think it's a piece of the puzzle and a piece of the story, and we do look at it very closely. But if there's a personal circumstance and a student can't secure it, or a counselor was having a bad day and forgot part of it, or copied and pasted and put the wrong university on the form, which happens a lot more frequently than people think, we're not going to automatically deny or admit somebody based off of that. But if the narrative and the story that the counselors are describing supports the kind of the picture that's being painted that the student shows us, I think it complements a decision that we're leaning towards.
Do you accept letters of recommendation in languages other than English?
We don't. I mean, it happens, and particularly we get letters in Arabic or French pretty regularly, but we do ask folks to try to translate documents whenever possible. And that's particularly important, and this isn't necessarily as much with the Common App, but for financial aid later on. A lot of schools will ask for those documents to be in, US dollars and English.
And then we covered the, who can act and submit counselor forms if there's not a counselor role. All right, I think we've got like 5 minutes left. I'm going to kind of just charge through, Melissa, or do you want to pause and do questions?
Just one additional question. I think there was one very specific question at the top. We can wait and have her ask there. But then in terms of recommendation letters, there was just going back to the number of teacher recommenders. Some students want to include more than 2. What's your recommendation on that? Should advisors and counselors, discourage that? What's your position on that?
I'm going to let you, I'll let you go first, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that's a delicate balance, I suppose. I would say, we're probably looking for the quality of the recommendation as opposed to the quantity. From my experience, you don't necessarily see this as much on the pure application side of things, where this really starts to come up if a student's waitlisted or deferred, then all of a sudden there's a rush for additional documentation. And we discourage students from doing that. We would recommend, if there's an additional standardized test score, if there's an increase on the IELTS or the Duolingo, or if somebody managed to take the SAT or the ACT, that would be something to update a school on. And typically, if it's later in the process, it wouldn't be going through Common App. The students or the counselors would have to send that directly to the school.
Yeah, and what I would say, just thinking about my role formerly as a counselor, is if there's something that's unique about an additional letter of recommendation that's going to add to the story, and then it's supported. And that's why it's kind of on an individual case basis. But if it's just another teacher that's going to repeat what some other teacher has already said about how great the student is and how great they are in class, it just becomes repetitive information. And with the limited time we know that admissions counselors have to read the files for students, if it's not a value add, there's no real benefit to having the student have additional letters of recommendation. All right, so quickly, just making sure you know where tools are for you as counselors and advisors. We have a suite of downloadables and PDFs through Common App Ready that go through all the different parts of the application process. So there's even a new resource we put out about the essay prompts. So if you wanted to kind of help guide students through how to approach the essay, We have ones on paying for college, on inviting recommenders. There's a handout specifically for international applicants. So if you have, when we're all back in offices and people can come visit us, and you wanted to have some handouts on Common App, you can always print these from our Common App Ready site. I mentioned our support team. They are available 24/7. There's also just self-service searching for frequently asked questions. We have a writing requirements resource on the app support website. This is a place where you can go and look at to kind of find some of those hidden questions that schools might have, or just what questions that they are asking. So it's dynamic filter, look up a school, find out if they require the Common App essay, and then find out what kind of additional questions they ask. It's also a great way for students to get a sense of fit for a school. If they look at some of these prompts that a school is presenting and they're really struggling to see how to respond, and they're just not thinking, the questions that a school creates is part of their own culture. And again, Alex, I don't know if you've been part of the process of writing your own questions for institutions you've worked at, but again, would just kind of love your take on how schools decide what their supplemental questions are going to be.
So we've tweaked ours at NUQ here over the last couple of years, but we've left it pretty vague. And for us, it's an important tool in like 250 words or less. So it's not like somebody has to write a novel of just kind of why they're interested. And I would say that it's a critical insight for us, and we can tell, some people will copy and paste stuff off the website, like verbatim, same words, everything. And I don't think that us as an office, we're particularly strict, because there's a question here about, how schools are really strict about the writing. As someone who works with international students almost exclusively, I would say we're not strict on the formatting, the spacing, any of that. We really want to see the content and kind of the messaging behind it. I hope that answers your question, Meredith.
Yeah, it does. All right. Also, just wanted to put a plug. If you're not familiar, that Common App, we are together with Reach Higher, which was an initiative of Michelle Obama's when the Obamas were in the White House, to really encourage students to pursue higher education. And as part of our Reach Higher initiatives, there is a lot of student-facing content. So if you want to expose your students to what it's like to be on a U.S. college campus, to hear directly from students, again, I know a lot of our members have, all of our members, right, have on their websites great resources, but these are kind of condensed versions of like what to expect when you get to a college campus, how to navigate a college campus when you get there. And so through partnerships with Instagram and YouTube, we have these student-facing resources. And then I'll leave you with the Learn More, which is just, there are lots of ways you can stay connected with Common App. We do have a monthly newsletter that goes out. You can sign up for it through commonapp.org/advisors. We put out blog posts. We talked about the practice account. We have video tutorials on YouTube. And we also, I just put links, and again, you're going to get this as a file, but we have done some recent webinars, which might also get you just some additional information if you're working with transfer students. We're currently in the middle of an Excellence in College Counseling webinar series. And so just wanted to make you aware of that. Another piece that I will plug is we have an ideas portal. So we understand at Common App that we are continuing to evolve the process, and it is not a perfect system. The application is not perfect. The recommender process is not perfect. There's lots of room for improvement. If you have suggestions, especially on how we can make it more inclusive for international students, you could always go to ideas.commonapp.org and put in your ideas. And it does go directly to our product team. Also sharing the link here for Northwestern so that you can continue to explore there. And Melissa, I know we don't have we have a few minutes. You can pick and
Oh,
choose
it's good.
questions.
I think, well, yeah, I think I was going through some of the questions that were submitted in advance of the session. I think most of those were answered. But and thank you both. I learned a lot as well. I don't get to, do as much as the student facing piece. And so it is helpful to gain this knowledge so that as advisors ask me questions working with students, I can also provide better support for them. So very, very appreciated. So there is a question about, I think the writing was addressed. Is there a limit to the number of schools a student can add to his or her college list?
So Common App Online does max out at 20 institutions. And we, last year there were 1 million students using Common App. They submitted a total of 5.6 million applications. So the general, math there is it's around 5 on average that we see through Common App. It is a little higher from international students, but I think it's around 7. We have heard this year, because of the pandemic and so many unknowns, that we've seen an increase, and we've heard from counselors that students are applying, especially with test optional policies, just feeling very anxious and unsure about decisions. So students have been applying to more, but it's less than 1% of students that we see that max out at the full 20.
Okay. And with that, because we did talk to some counselors, what would each of your perspectives be on how many is, a good number for students to be applying to not over, max, not to tap out the whole system?
You want to go first, Alex?
Yeah, I can tackle that. Having helped my niece last year and another niece this year, I could say from a family perspective, I think 10 to 15 is probably the most you would want to do. It also can get expensive. I mean, not everyone's going to flip a fee waiver your way, and so that can add up. I would like to add that, we read in the newspapers these days about, your really selective schools being up in applications massively and things like that. But there's a large number of schools that aren't and that are down right now. And I think there's a college or a university for everyone out there. And it's really important for students to know that, to focus on, urban versus suburban versus rural versus large versus middle size versus small. And so there's so many opportunities that students can pursue. And I think despite all the craziness that we're dealing with right now, a lot of good can come from this, and that people can kind of open and expand their view of where they want to go to college for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and I would echo exactly what Alex is saying, and that's where the college exploration process is just so important. And it's, students have to know the resources to go to find schools beyond looking at U.S. News and World Report and certain, rankings of the most elite schools, because even in the United States, there are over 2,000 four-year institutions. And so if students only look at the top 100, they're missing out on 1,900 other really amazing institutions that could be a great fit for them, that could have really great financial aid packages, that could offer the major of what they're trying to study. So they have to start the process with researching schools before they just hone in on the names that they've heard of.
Agreed on that. We try very hard to make sure they're looking beyond those ranking lists. So yeah, that's a good point to emphasize. Another question is, what does written evaluation mean?
Got it. That's basically letter of recommendation.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, with the letter of recommendation, there is also an evaluation where the teachers or counselors are also having to talk about the student on a ranking kind of scale, and so that's where the evaluation part comes. But written evaluation is basically the letter writing.
And validation of application. That's another question in terms of what does that mean? And it doesn't have many more details, just says validation of application.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, we can.
Happy, yeah, if you have, whoever posed that question, if you want to write a follow-up.
They might not, because I was checking for the name. I don't think they're on the call right now.
Okay.
But I will also say there were two questions just in terms of what are some do's and don'ts or common mistakes that students are making when filling out the application?
You go ahead. As a reader, Alex, you can start.
I would say number one, try to stay clear of university names in the essays. You know, that's something we see pretty regularly, that people forget to copy and paste that out. That's probably number one touch point. The other interesting thing, and if you ask other admissions officers out there, there are also trends within different countries and different regions for what information is shared on the application. Like, if I'm reading files, if I'm back working at my US-based university and I'm traveling on the Western United States, people will list like, you know, 1,000 activities. Every single space will be filled up, and it will, whether it's helpful or not, it will be listed. And then here in Qatar and in the region, students are much more selective in the activities that they list. And so I think that can be really helpful for us as someone who reads a lot of international apps. If a student's really passionate about something and really wants to talk about it, it's something for them to expand on, and counselors can kind of help them with that, because there can be at times a lot of empty space from international students in their apps.
So I do want to open it up for anyone on the call who can just unmute and ask their questions. So if we do have any of the advisors or counselors on, you can maybe raise your virtual hand if you have a specific question, and we can have you ask it that way. Doing a quick, oh good, it's now on the grid view. One question that did come in through
I would like to have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh.
Yes, go ahead, Aviva.
Sorry. So it's a bit complex, and Melissa kind of answered it a while ago, but I just want to make sure I understood. We have a lot of student inquiries, and I'm an EducationUSA advisor in Israel. And in many cases, we have students who haven't been in the education system for a while because they go through the army and they do a lot of things in between. So they don't have any personal relations with their school or with their principals or teachers. Therefore, a lot of the times it's hard for them to have them fill in the transcripts part. And we get a lot of questions on how they can, what they can do about that. So Melissa did say that EducationUSA advisors can send the transcripts in instead. And I just wanted to know if that is possible also on the Common App platform.
Yeah, so we don't tell, the student invites whomever to submit the academic records. So it's up to the student. And so, you know, my cautionary, it would just be making sure that if it's an EducationUSA advisor, they're explaining in their letter or forms why they are the ones submitting the information, so that there's not a fear of fraud, because sometimes our members will come to us and say, we don't, you know, this person doesn't work at the school. We don't think that it's, we're concerned about who's submitting the form. So I think if the individual just submits the, you know, here's why I'm the person, here's how I have access to this information, just so that it can be seen as legitimate information.
Okay, thank you.
And I would, yeah, and I would also again invite you, as you work with older students, because we hear this as we're supporting veterans, returning adults, that the application is still written in very much in a way of supporting students who are right in secondary school. And so we're aware of that, and we're addressing it. But I would say putting that into the ideas portal, trying, helping us think through how we can put additional instructional language into the application so that we can make it feel more inclusive for students who are older and have been out of high school for several years. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, and I would also add there's a space on the application as well for them to list gaps in education as well. And so I've worked with students before in the IDF where they would spell out their military service. So it also is helpful for people who are reading the file to then see that.
Yeah, and when Education USA advisors do try to step in and fill that role, oftentimes it's one, because the student has been working with Education USA, so there is a relationship. It's not a student that can just walk in and request that, and that advisor can check with the school to make sure that this is a legitimate document so that it's being submitted on their behalf, but that there is a level of verification so that the student isn't just submitting it on their own. That just raised another question. Someone asked about our graduate studies, graduate programs, part of the Common App process.
Great question. They are not. So Common App does have a first year application as well as a transfer application. And our transfer application is supported by the Liaison platform. And Liaison does have their own graduate platforms, common application systems through Liaison, but that is not part of Common App. So we support undergraduate applications.
Great, thank you so much. Any final questions from attendees before we wrap up? There is one in the chat, and apologies for the dogs that might be barking in the background. Is it possible to skip the school profile section and only submit transcripts and recommendations as a student's counselor? There are many schools in Egypt that would not share their school profile info with advisors to be submitted on their behalf.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that many of the questions in the school profile section of Common App are optional. And that's because there's an upload function where counselors can upload a PDF of a school profile. So, kind of like Alex said, or others will say, like, the more information that a counselor can provide, the more context the reader at the admissions office has about a school and a student. So those questions are there just to help them have the best information to make an informed decision. If you are doing this on behalf of a student or school, you provide the most information that you have available to you.
Great, and we do have one final question. I think, yeah, we did miss this one from Ilham. So Alex added the link for description on what FERPA is. It is a privacy law in the US that just lets students know, their information can't just be shared with anybody. There are rules and regulations that anyone collecting data has to follow in terms of how and who to share that with. So that's the FERPA side of things. Naviance, as you might have seen from one of the previous slides, is one of those platforms that are used within high schools to help advisors through that college process. So depending on the platform, there were some other ones, Unifrog, Maya Learning, there's a lot of different ones that different schools use, but it provides, there are tools sometimes in those where students can do interest assessments. It helps them track their process. So, depending on what grade they are, there might be certain steps that they should follow to be prepared. So it's more of it's a system that high schools use. And so Naviance wouldn't be something that you have access to because it is through the school. So anything that is being submitted through that would be from the school counselor. So that's why you would be unclear because you wouldn't have access to that particular system.
And I would just add to that, Melissa, how it impacts a student within Common App is there are codes for every high school, so this called SEEB codes. And if a student is at a school that uses Naviance or Maya Learning or Unifrog or one of these partners, when they get to the recommendation requests part of the application, we actually block them from inviting a counselor and their teachers. And we say, based on the school that you've said you attend, your school is using Naviance. Therefore, you will not invite your counselor and teachers here. You have to go through your school through Naviance. And so that's where the student would see that within their application.
And I would add it's primarily US-based students now, because Naviance is not supported internationally. So it'd be rarer for international students to see that.
One of the other questions that we get, and again, Melissa, I don't know what time we're stopping, so we're gonna lean on you to let us know when we break. But the order of how things go, like, does a student have to have everything together to submit? Can a counselor submit before a student? And so just understanding that a student, once they invite a counselor or invite their teachers, they get all the green check marks. They don't have to have the counselor or teacher, they don't have to have submitted their forms. The student can go ahead and submit their application. And then on the flip side, once a counselor or teacher is invited, they can go and submit their forms through our recommender system or one of the partners. They don't have to wait for the student to have submitted. I will say, however, Common App does not deliver any recommender forms to the colleges until the student submits their application. So we do hold those letters of recommendation until the student submits their application. But the student can submit, and then the letters of recommendation can come days, weeks after the student submits.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. This was definitely helpful, and I hope our advisors got their questions answered, but there are, again, resources that you will be able to look into further. We encourage you all to set up one of those practice accounts, especially those of you working with a lot of students that are using the Common App, so that you can do that walkthrough on your own and get more experience and see where there might be some hiccups for your students. We will have the recording available and share the slides so that you can access some of those links. But I'll turn it to Paula and Asil just for their final words, but thank you again.
I just wanted to thank you both. It was so informative. I learned a lot as a newbie in this role, so I really appreciate finding out more about the resources available on the Common App website. Now I know where to go when I need extra help, and thank you so much. And thank you, Alex. It was just fantastic. Appreciate it. And thank you, Melissa, for moderating.
Yes. And we'll follow up with everyone with information on a student-specific session so that you can share that with your students. This was really more so for you to get the information that helps you be a better advisor with your students. So we will have something separate for students as well.
Yeah, it'll be in February. We're going to finalize the date hopefully this week. So we'll get that information out to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, afternoon, and morning, and happy Inauguration Day. We'll see how the activities and festivities roll out. So thank you.
Thank you all.